Welcome to Doing the Most, the series where we talk about the misadventures of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Georgie, execution strategist and serial entrepreneur. This series is here to get real about what entrepreneurial life truly looks like. We are driven, persistent, hardworking, ambitious. We are human, and these are our stories. Welcome back to Doing the Most, the misadventures of entrepreneurship. Today, our very special guest is Tameka Vasquez. She is a previous entrepreneur, and now she is working on a lot of other big projects inside of an organization. And she's here to tell us her story and all about her entrepreneurial venture to now her entrepreneurial venture. So, Tameka, could you tell us about who you are? Give us a quick intro, maybe 4 to 5 sentences.
Yeah, sure. So really glad to be doing this. It's always great to be able to reconnect and talk about these things. My background, for the most part, has been working in a marketing and business development function for tech companies. So that's historically what I've done, serving a variety of industries from advertising to publishing to financial services, just moved around a few different industries. But I've always been in that role of being a strategist and driving marketing and business development programs for the sake of selling some kind of software solution. And yeah, that's pretty much been the journey. And currently I've kind of doubled up on the ways that I've been navigating those spaces and taking all the lessons that I've learned, and actually now teach part-time as well at a university. So that's me.
Nice. So let's take a few steps back, go back a couple years. Could you talk about when you first became an entrepreneur and what made you, act on your entrepreneurial bug?
Yeah, it's interesting because the point that I hit was sort of the point that you would think would be the height of your career. It's your peak. It's when you should be the happiest. You should be the most fulfilled. And it was a point that I just found myself feeling very lost and just needing to allow myself to explore all of the opportunities that were out there. And you really just need time to do that. When you're working full time for a company, it's very difficult to be able to juggle those things. And so for me, like I said, I was at the peak of my career. I was doing really, really well considering my age at the time. And I decided, at that point, I had been running this corporate game for probably 5 or 6 years. And I decided that was a good time to just take a step back, take a pause, try and see if I could really do this on my own, and just be able to reassess and see what's out there, meet new people, just be in new environments. And that was pretty much what spun me into that entrepreneurial journey.
Nice. And what was the first venture you launched as an entrepreneur?
So the first thing I actually ended up doing was working for a small tech company that was based out of Switzerland, and they needed somebody to help them launch their platform in the United States. They also needed somebody to help them, go to various investors and try to get, various venture capital dollars and things like that. And so, super small company. I just started working with them, and I was trying to figure out, how to package myself up as a service, all the things that I had learned and all the things that I had done working for companies of all sizes and different industries. They were my first opportunity to be able to take all of the things that I learned and the skills that I developed and put it into a package that would serve their immediate need, which at the time was, we have to expand and we have to generate investment dollars in order to really grow at the pace we want to. So that was my first project.
Nice. And how did you find out about that opportunity? Now that I'm thinking about it, you said it's like all the way, the company was like based in Switzerland. Did you go over there to work for them? Was it more so like a remote kind of position? Could you talk a little bit about like that part of the aspect of the opportunity?
Yeah, it was fully remote. The interesting thing was everything is time and place, right? And so I was all over the place, running around, going to events, trying to find projects. And at no surprise, but I guess at a surprise at the time, this first project came through a referral, just somebody who I had gone to college with, back in the day, who remembered me when her fiance at the time asked, do you know anybody who can help with marketing strategy? He was a co-founder of the company, and his co-founders were out in Switzerland, and they have some remote engineering teams in other countries, and yeah, that's pretty much how that happened. So even after all that running around, it really just came down to word of mouth and being referred directly by somebody that I knew.
Yeah, I see that a whole lot with a lot of opportunities, and even myself, the majority of the opportunities, the lasting or the good opportunities that I get are through referrals. So guys, whoever is listening out there, be mindful of, who you know. So those networking opportunities or networking events that you go to right now, those are really just planting the seeds. It's the opportunity that's going to come, 5, 10, 15 years from now through that relationship that you built with the person that you connected with and meant. That's going to be the fruit that you reap from it. It's not going to happen overnight. You may get lucky and the person that you met last week at that meetup is going to be able to connect you with an opportunity, I don't know, a week from now. That's like really unlikely, but it's the person that you went to college with, the person that you met 5 years ago at that previous meetup. That's the person that's going to say, hey, I know this person so well and I've seen a lot of their work, because while you're gaining your experience, it's kind of like they're right there with you, watching you gain that experience. It's like as if, and we want to relate it to sports or something, you're playing the game and they've been to all of your games. They see how you play. They understand your methods. They know what you're about and they know that you're consistent with it. And now they feel confident in saying, okay, hey, person that I know needs something that's important and valuable and needs quality. I think Tameka's the best person for it. I think Georgie's the best person for it because I've seen her do it. So just be really mindful of that. Go ahead.
100%. Because the interesting thing was this wasn't somebody that I had met in a setting where my intention was to network and my intention was to have them know what I do for a living. This is somebody that I met in school, but the impression that I must have left on her, she was a couple years ahead of me. We only had one class together, So for her to remember me all these years later, what was the trigger was really being able to associate me with a very specific thing, which in this case was marketing. So when she heard the words marketing strategy, she was like, yeah, I know somebody who did that, and was able to kind of dig through her Rolodex even 5-6 years down the road and, give me that leg up for that opportunity. So it's interesting that everything you just said, I 100% agree with, but I think the key is, it's not always the people that you're directly trying to build relationships or networking with. It's just the people that are around you, and making sure that you're consistent in your interactions, and people, even if you stand nothing to gain from them, at least on the surface, and they stand nothing to gain from you on the surface, they can associate you in a certain way. They have a certain respect level for you. You conduct yourself in a way that is memorable. That stuff goes such a long way. And, if the story I just gave is any indication, I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And another thing that I want to highlight that you just mentioned is the specialization, the fact that they could associate you with a specific thing. Right now, it's common to kind of want to be known as a jack of all trades. You are a solopreneur or a innovator that could do X, Y, Z, A through Z. You could do everything. But if someone could say, okay, boom, I definitely know she's great at marketing. Boom, I definitely know he's great at finances. It's a lot easier for them to kind of remember you and like have you stand out in that sense. So when something does come up that needs a specialized person, or just something comes up, it's more a direct thing versus, oh, I don't really know. He does a little bit of that. He does a little bit of this. I don't really know if he's going to be interested in that, but if they could associate you with something, and that's literally a part of your branding as well. You might not be doing it on purpose, but just keep that in mind as you're trying to build up your repertoire, your resume, just your effect that you have on everyone else out there. The next question I have for you is to talk a little bit about, what was a crazy story of a misadventure that you experienced while on your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, no, I made a lot of mistakes, the first few months in particular on this whole journey of trying to be an entrepreneur and trying to navigate this new world of having to build something for myself, and there are so many mishaps, but they were mostly just things that I had to learn on the spot. So I don't really have too many crazy stories, but the type of story that comes to mind right away is just being thrown into a pitch competition literally like the day before the competition was supposed to be happening. And so I was working with this company, and they invited me to come out with them to Silicon Valley to participate in the Startup Grind conference. And this is, a conference that takes place in different cities around the world, but the one that is in Redwood City in Silicon Valley is kind of like their premier conference. So that's where they bring everybody together. They have pitch competitions, they have series of talks, and they have investors that are roaming around, and it's intended to be the one-stop shop for everything that you need to learn and bring together and network for the sake of building your startup. And so pretty much at the last minute, the co-founders asked if I would be willing, to take on the pitch challenge. And this was literally like the day before. I had never done anything like that before. But just for the sake of, maintaining a good relationship, building what I hope to be a long-term relationship, I stepped in for them because there were many reasons behind why they just weren't ready and comfortable doing that, language barriers and things like that as well. But, so they trusted me, and they wanted to see if this could be an opportunity for us via me, essentially. And yeah, I got thrown into it last minute, and I had to go up there and deliver, I think it was like 45 seconds that you had to make a pitch, to make an ask, in front of like 600 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the scariest 45 seconds of my life. But, I don't call it a mishap per se, but it's one of those things where, had you been trained, had you been prepped, I'm sure it would have went a lot better. I think they went okay, but it's probably one of the most memorable experiences of just being able to step up, to a challenge and being able to fill in a role that somebody really needs you to play in that moment, in this case, for the sake of building out a team and building this client relationship, but also just for the sake of showing that you're reliable and you're dependable and you're flexible as well. So, a lot of mini stories like that along the way, but that one just came to mind right away when you asked.
Yeah, definitely showing up and just like taking the action, even though I'm pretty sure you're super scared and just like, what am I about to do? Is this even going to work? Am I going to even remember what I'm like trying to say? In those situations, I think it's really important to just say, you know what? Life is short. It goes on. Even if I make a fool out of myself for these 45 seconds, at least I know I'm not going to regret or think, oh, what could have happened? What if anything happened? Did you win any prizes from that? Or was it just like a pitch, not really like a prize after pitch kind of thing?
Yeah, there was no prize. The goal was to be able to try and be memorable to the people that are in the audience, because essentially they would come up to you afterwards and, they would engage and they would want to learn more. And you never know if there was an investor there, and just people who are in that kind of startup ecosystem. So there was no prize, but there was a lot on the line, and, 600 sets of eyeballs on you at the same time. So, but I mean, I actually thought about something else while I was saying that. In terms of something that was a bit more of a mishap, I really had to learn how to work remotely. And it's almost silly to say this now, but
Amen.
I learned the hard way. Things like just being able to make sure that where you're going has a Wi-Fi connection, and, making sure where you're going has a quiet space for you to take calls and for you to kind of be in the zone, that you're not being kicked out of a place after a half hour of sitting there not buying anything. Like, I made so many teeny tiny mistakes like that along the way, just because I didn't even know what it was like to work remotely prior to doing this, stepping out on my own. I had never had a job that let me work remotely before that. So it was interesting to, have to navigate that new world of having to find a place to work sometimes every other day, and then budgeting and making sure I could get like a WeWork membership at a certain point. Like, there were so many things like that I just had to scrap together and kind of learn on the spot. So that came to mind as well when I was telling the other story.
Nice. And I totally, well, 150% agree about working remote. It sounds so, leisurely, like, oh, you don't have to go into the office, you don't have to get dressed every day. But working remote is, I think, even more tedious than working in an office, because one of the biggest shockers for me, I don't know if you could probably agree, was the cutting a line to where work ends and like home life begins. Because if you're working literally, in your living room, bedroom, whatever, it's easy to say work begins when I wake up and work ends when I go to sleep. And it's easy to just continue answering the phones or replying to emails and just being available 24/7 versus when you previously worked in person or whatever, you are available, 9 to 5, 8 to 4, 10 to 6, whatever. Now it's just like, when does the clock stop? It never stops. I was just always working. So I had to set boundaries that, even though I'm technically at work all the time and technically at home all the time, this is my workspace. I'm not going to move my computer from this area. I'm not going to, take my work into the bedroom. This space right here is dedicated to my work. Another thing that I had to do was say, okay, even though I can reply to this email at 12:01 a.m., I'm not gonna. If I want to type it, that's on my time. I'm going to use an app or a feature. One of the plugins that I use is called Streak. That will, if I type emails at like 2 a.m., it doesn't send them till 8 a.m. because to let people know, like, I am technically not available right now. Work is over, and build those boundaries was something that I never even thought about before I was working remotely, and I had to learn the hard way.
We all did. It's so funny because, people romanticize the idea of you can work from anywhere and you can wake up at any time. And, all of that is true. But the asterisk that you have to put when you make statements like that is exactly what you said. The lines get blurred between, your work and your personal life. You really learn a lot about yourself and your discipline, as an entrepreneur, and being in that entrepreneurial mindset. It forces you to learn more about yourself than you ever have, because people take for granted, when you have a job, there's a certain structure and there's a certain expectation that all you have to do is not screw that up. But when you are sort of answering to yourself, there's a different mindset, a mindset shift that has to happen in order for you to successfully come into your own and learn your habits and learn your work style and learn what's going to be both inspirational and productive at the same time, just to kind of keep yourself in the sort of phase that you need to be in to be performing at your best and to be achieving your goals. I wish people, kind of understood that a bit more, certainly before jumping into it, but just in general. I think for the people like us who have navigated that space before, I think it's up to us to kind of tell the truth about what these things are really like. It was the best a year and a half or so of my life in terms of everything I learned, but little things like working remotely and figuring out where to work and where has a Wi-Fi connection and what playlist do I need to get my mind right, and, how do I have a better sense of self-awareness so I'm not just lying to myself. Like, all those tiny details are just really important for us to start incorporating into the narrative around being an entrepreneur and working remotely and all that stuff.
Yeah, because those little things that we take for granted end up making us some big, oftentimes expensive mistakes.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
so I've been there, done that. I will warn y'all, be careful. So now I want to start shifting gears a bit. We were discussing earlier that you've exited the entrepreneurial space, but I say, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur, no matter what you're doing, where you are. Even if you're working inside of an organization, you become an entrepreneur because that mindset that you develop is always going to be there. But you no longer, run your own business. Now you're working and building an entrepreneurial aspirations inside of an organization. So could you tell us a little bit about why you decided to make that shift back to an organization full time? How did that feel? How did folks around you respond? How did you feel about that? So could we just talk a little bit about that whole situation, the transition?
Yeah.
situation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I mean, the transition was a really pivotal point in my life, so there's a lot that goes into that story, but the best way for me to summarize it would be to say I am very perceptive, and I learned to just pick up the cues of where my life was at the time to signal to me that this was the right time to step back in to a slightly more structured environment and, stepping back into having a full-time job again. It was just a matter of me really, really being perceptive because I was learning a lot. I was meeting a lot of people. I was traveling a lot. I was on the road. I was really feeling productive, but there were certain things that were just not lining up and certain things that were just not adding up. I ended up losing a couple clients along the way. My biggest client, had to rescind on their renegotiation of the contract, and that was a big blow for me. And then there were other sort of things that were happening at the time impacting my ability to scale up the other client relationships that I had, and there was just a lot going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I felt productive, I felt motivated, the signs around me were really telling me, like, you know what, you have to kind of reassess if this is something that you could really sustain for another year, or if this is something that you kind of want to scale back. And I really have to decide to myself, what's the most important thing right now? And for me, the most important thing at the time was I just want to ensure that my skill set is not going stale, that I'm not taking certain things for granted, that I'm staying up to trend in terms of, technology, and because that's the industry that I've been working in and that was my core expertise. And I just wanted to make sure that I was in an environment that would allow for that. So it just so happened to be at the time, the environment that would have best allowed for that was going back into a full-time role. That being said, I made sure I held it out as long as I could. And I made sure that when I did step back into a full-time role, that I just wasn't taking any job, because at this point I had seen too much on my own and I had tested myself in so many ways. And I had, really just been proud of myself, and I didn't want to let all of that go to the wayside. So for me, it was a matter of stepping into the right role, one that exactly what you said would allow me to adopt more of that entrepreneurial mindset now that I've had that entrepreneurial experience, and not have all of that stuff go to waste, but instead to use that to really level up what I was doing. So the transition back in was tough simply because, now you're back at an office, you're back at that sort of work style and that work lifestyle, and you kind of have to readjust. And so it took me a couple months just to literally just to remember, oh wait, I have to go to the office, and I have to interact with people, and I have to, it just kind of took me a while, because you operate in this very isolated environment for so long that you almost forget that, you have to socialize and you have to interact with your colleagues and all these little tiny things that you just forget. So
exactly.
The transition back in was, it took me a couple months, but I think what really allowed me to hit the ground running was getting a better sense of what kind of projects I was going to be running, what kind of initiatives would I be leading, what sort of stuff could I really do and contribute that didn't have a very specific set of tasks associated with it. So it was really here, this is the challenge, this is the business problem, and you go solve it, and just that same mindset that got me through scrambling and finding clients and projects and all that stuff was very easily transferable to a mindset where now I'm in-house at a company and I have to provide value pretty much from day one, but it's less intimidating without, now that I didn't need the structure, now that I didn't need the to-do list to come from my boss, I didn't need that stuff. So It was very, in that respect, it was a very seamless transition to be able to, like I said, hit the ground running, being back at a full-time occupation.
Yeah, that is definitely amazing. And I think, a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, when things might not be going right in your business, there's a lot of guilt. Maybe I'm not using the right word, but I think it's guilt around even thinking or wanting to get that stability back of something full time until you could, be back 100% in the entrepreneurial scope. And I think, especially when you have a network, not even a support system, a network of folks that might have not been supportive in the beginning. It's just, you feel almost you have something to prove. There's a lot of ego that goes into it as well, with the guilt that why would you give up now? Or, you're psyching yourself out, just keep pushing, just keep trying to go, just, it's just kind of an overwhelming feeling. And then when you make that final decision, now again, dealing with folks in your background that might be saying something negative, or might be saying, oh, why did you do that? I told you shouldn't have launched it. I knew it was going to work. So just like that fear of what's going to happen, it's just a lot of feelings that bubble up. But what I really want to highlight was how you described it as, you did what was right for you at that time. You looked at the situation for not, what I've done over the last 3 years, but I have a whole life ahead of me. What am I going to do next? I could always jump back into the entrepreneurial scope when I'm ready and when I need to. I could always, try something new, but what right now, based on my needs and my wants, what is the best thing for me to do to move forward? And then from there, making that decision, whether it's to scale back your company, completely shut down your company. Because, I shut down Illicit mine last year. And when I tell you, I cried like a baby.
Yeah.
Because
I cried my first day going back to work.
Yeah,
nobody knows that. Now you know that.
And now the listeners, you literally
and
mourn
all the listeners know that.
You mourn your business, you mourn that experience, and then you're excited, but you're also scared, and you're it's that system of what is it called, grieving, that you go through when you're about to start that new position. And so that there's a lot of emotions tied up into this, and just recognizing that and not being afraid to be honest about that. Because I feel like not a lot of people are transparent about that. And people might even get a full-time job while still running their company, but they keep it under the curtains, like it's like this big secret, like shh, don't tell anybody. I don't work here. They're not gonna update their LinkedIn. They're not gonna put it on their resume, because it just feels like almost you're being deceptive. Like, you're supposed to be this rich 6, 7, 8, 9 figure entrepreneur. Why do you need a job? The man is holding you back. So I just feel like,
again, it's like,
go ahead.
It's up to us, it's really up to us to stop the glorification of this lifestyle and really just start telling these stories. I was reading somewhere, I was reading an article earlier today, and one of the phrases that came out of the article was, if something is very, very near and dear to you, most likely it matters to the rest of the world. And what they were essentially saying was, as long as you have personal experience and there is that emotional attachment that you described, there's a very high likelihood that story has to be told on a much, much broader scale, because the universe, the world probably needs to hear it, because if it's close to you, it's probably close to millions of people as well. And so I think it's just up to us to tell better stories, but it's also up to us that's why I gave the disclaimer that I have a high degree of perceptiveness, and I have a very high degree of self-awareness. And that allowed me to kind of take a slice of humble pie when I needed to, but also just to be able to put things into context. And again, exactly what you said, it's not the be all end all just because you decide, all right, I'm going to go back and see what happens, maybe potentially step back out, maybe not, Exactly. You have to allow yourself to be an experiment, and you don't have anything to prove to anybody but yourself, because the overwhelming majority of people that you're probably trying to prove something to do not have the bravery that you had to even take that step in the first place. Yes. So it's going to fall on deaf ears, So when people are like, oh, you're selling out and you're going back to the man and you're doing this and doing that, it's like, yeah, but tell me how many times you failed. I don't want to know how many times, you did something that you succeeded at right away, because that probably meant it was too easy. I need to know when you failed, what you learned, how you picked yourself up, brushed yourself off, pivoted, how you are flexible and able to go into different spaces of your life and navigate them in new ways, and what lessons you learned. That's stuff people need to be talking about. So yeah, I just I don't look at it as a setback. I don't look at it as a failure. I purely look at it as time, place. Within that specific context, you are making the best decisions with the options that are handed to you.
Y'all out there listening? Did you hear all those gems, y'all? Come on. Because that's the realness of it. That's the facts of it. And so, that is literally, if I could redo the introduction for this podcast, that would be it. You know, that is what we're trying to tackle here. This stereotypical, you know, one size fits all, everybody must be a 6-figure entrepreneur kind of mentality, when it's just not like that. You're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some, it's life. You learn, you know, evaluate, then you move on, and then you keep going. Don't, you know, overthink it. Don't feel, oh, you know, I've been at it for 10 years and now this kid's at it for 2 years and he has a 9-figure round raised, and so I got to go raise a round. That's not for you. That's not for you.
Yeah.
And just,
and I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I mean, I think everybody when they're trying to make those types of decisions, and they're, you know, trying to find people that they could look up to or potentially compare themselves to, and all of that stuff, what we all fail to understand is, you know, I don't believe like what will be, but I do believe there's a degree of self-control, but I do believe that in order for you to figure out what's really meant for you, so to speak, and what's really where you're really meant to go and the path that you're really meant to take, you really have to take a step back and not necessarily look left nor right. You really just kind of have to look straight ahead. And, you know, it's your path. Like, your flashlight might shine all around you, but ultimately what's going to help you get from point A to point B is shining that flashlight forward and figuring out where's the end of this road. And guess what? That's going to lead to another road. So, you know, I think people are looking for something and they don't know what it is. And entrepreneurship for a lot of people is an opportunity for them to really find whatever they think it is. You know, if it's money, if it's fulfillment, if it's the feeling of freedom, you know, if it's this individualism and this hubris that allows them to feel potentially better than other people, whatever it is, they're trying to find it. But the flashlight is going all over the place, you know, trying to navigate this dark forest, trying to see who's here, who's there, and comparing themselves and contrasting themselves, instead of just looking at the path that's directly in front of you to figure out what is really meant for me within this context. Maybe it is just for you to try it out, to push your buttons, see what you're made of. Maybe it is that you are going to be this multimillionaire. Maybe it is for you to build the flexibility to be able to travel the world and work on your own time. Maybe all those things might be true, but it can't be for everybody, and everybody's story can't be a copy paste of the other person. So, you know, I think that's just really what it boils down to is people are trying to find something, and they are trying to find based on predefined notions and based on other people's stories instead of focusing on their own path.
Ooh, finger snaps. Ooh. They're trying to find based on predefined notions. Oh, y'all, you can't even buy this stuff. These gems is just drop it. Here you go, just dollar, you know, spreading dollar bills. Here you go. You get a life-changing advice. You get a life-changing advice. Yeah, my goodness. You know, definitely appreciate you diving deep on that, and definitely keeping it real. Like, this is what this is about, because again, there's so much guilt behind it, so much fear behind it, so much disappointment, and just all this stereotype that it ain't it. Your path is for you, period. That's all. If you don't take away anything else from this episode, your path is for you. And guess what? You get to decide what's next on that path. No matter how many opinions or ideas or suggestions other people give, at the end of the day, your choices are your choices. Your circumstances are your circumstances. And whatever happens, be okay with it. You know, maybe be sad with it, but then just take another chance and keep it pushing. Make another choice, turn in another direction, but keep going on your specific path, because no two people's path will ever be the same. Not even twins. Look at Tia and Tamara living their best individual lives, you know.
True.
They came from one little egg, and now they're two whole humans that are doing the things that they have to do individually. And so just remind yourself of that. Not even twins have that same kind of lifestyle. We are coming up to the end, and, you know, you've given away so many gems and so much knowledge already. But if someone was to leave this podcast, what's the main thing you want to tell them or leave them with as the listeners go on with their entrepreneurial journey, go on with their take a break from it, just go on with their lives? What type of advice or just tangible actions, suggestions you want to leave with the audience?
Man, there's so much to say, and I could probably save it for a graduation speech one day. But yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, honestly, I could say things like life has no script, right? It doesn't. And you have to be able to accept and embrace that. It's a good thing that it doesn't have a script. It allows us to be the individuals and blossom in ways that you can't predict. There's no way when you were a kid growing up and as an adolescent and as a young adult, you would know that you would be here today in the ways that you're here today. And, with the blessings that you have and the challenges that you have that in disguise are blessings sometimes, right? So it's like, just life has no script. We have different reasons why we step into things like entrepreneurship. We have different things that we're trying to gain out of life. And if you just navigate it with that mindset of knowing that this isn't already written, so to speak, but every chapter is part of a larger story, and I don't have to necessarily have every page baked out. I don't have to have all my I's dotted and all my T's crossed. I just got to be open-minded. I just have to be flexible. I just have to kind of gain, like I said earlier, that degree of self-awareness that would allow you to step into things with a bit more confidence. When you really adopt that mindset, everything that you do in the realm of entrepreneurship gets a lot easier. Half the battle is really in your mind. So just being able to put your mind on something like that and say to yourself, life has no script. I'm opening this chapter. It's going to be written. It's going to be the best damn story one day. It just might not be the story that I originally set out to write. Those would probably be my parting words in this particular case. But like I said, there's so much that I could leave people with just in a very brief time that I spent out here hustling, trying to be somebody. So, but yeah, life has no script. Entrepreneurship has no script. That's the best way I would summarize this.
All righty, you guys heard it here. There is no script, and live the best damn life. It's your life. You only get one. So do what you can, do your best, move on, take chances, fail forward, lean in, all the good stuff, all the fancies. But at the end of the day, it comes down to there is no pre-written script. You get to decide what is next, what needs to be added, what needs to be taken away, and how that happens. Thank you so much for being here today, Tameka. Guys, her information will be in the comment section, so definitely check her out. She does a lot of different talks and tours. So, go to her next speaking engagement, but definitely check out Tameka Vasquez. She is an amazing person, as you heard it here, and maybe, she'll be your professor one day. What's your right now?
Right now, I'm at St. John's University.
So if y'all in St. John's, go check out Professor Vasquez. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Not a problem at all. You take care.
You too. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Doing the Most. Catch us here next week, same time, same place. If you can't wait, head on over to doingthemost.xyz to stay connected. Until next time, keep on doing.